Hello folks, I'm gonna try something different. I want this video to go viral. I'm not gonna swear, cuss, or curse. I'm gonna give an address to all Canadians as the collapse of Canada is imminent. And I did a post which is going actually super viral in multiple pages. I've already had thousands of comments just in a few hours tonight. And in Canada, there's been an explosion of news, most of which comes from the premiers of Canada. And I am sad to say that it's largely all Conservative premiers under Mark Carney who are doing the most damage to the... I'm going to have to move. That does it one more time. I'm going to be on the road. That's why I always sit in the car, people, because I can't stay in one spot very long at all or I get hit. Folks, Canada's... It's hard. What a life we live. And I find it funny that I seemingly, no matter where I am in Canada, no matter which teleprovider I get, it happens. It happens. Doesn't matter what province. Doesn't matter how dense or how close I am to a tower. If I stay in one spot, I get bumped. And I want to hit this. It's so important that one thing Canadians do over and over and over, and I've seen it tonight very explicitly. Again, thousands of comments on Ford's published interview today on CPAC. It's not made up. It's not digital AI. This was him on CPAC. That was his interview. Everybody jumping on it correctly, but incorrectly. They're always going the same narrative that if it was a conservative, a real one, because Doug Ford's not a real progressive conservative. Okay. Then I say, what about Danielle Smith? What about Ford and Danielle Smith going to bat for Northern Gateway Pipeline that is only for China? It's for China. Trans Mountain Pipeline, the expansion, all for China. All natural gas Alberta, expansion out to BC LNG, all for China. Okay, we got that? That's Premier Danielle Smith, Conservative. Now we go over to Scott Moe, who's a centrist party, so maybe we can't say Conservative, though he pretends to be. He is all for China in all expansions, all new projects, all for China. David Eby, all LNG, all China. Alberta takes the cake now, second only to a rising star. Also published today, Tim Houston, Conservative Premier, Nova Scotia. Did you all not see? He's bouncing people off their private property for lithium expansion to where? China. What do all these agendas all have in common? Well, it's Agenda 2050. It's the transition, everyone, to communist China economy. If you haven't noticed, as my good friend Angie Wilson, American, I missed it because there's so much news, even I can't keep up with it. And today was explosive. What's also very explosive is your dollar drop to under 71 cents on the USD today. We're not winning, Canadians. We're losing epically. And I'm going to tell you why this video is so very, very important. Is that we are floating our Canadian currency on the yuan against the USD. 100% Chinese tariffs are also 100% tariffs on all Canada's Chinese Agenda 2050 Green New Deal, China economy expansion. We've sold all our gold in Canada, all reserves to China largely, 2,400 metric tons of gold in 11 years to China. That's not just all of our reserves. That's everything we've mined in Canada in gold. Not to anybody else but through the London Exchange to communist China. Second, India, 400 metric tons. 2,400 metric tons of gold. 2,000 absolutely, unequivocally went to communist China out of Canada. The largest source and supplier through London, Canada. And all of our precious minerals, metals, rare earths, all of our fossil fuels are going not in an expansion to USA or Europe or anywhere else in the world, just communist China. That's it. That's all. All done with, yes, absolutely 9 years of Trudeau, but before that, 8 years of Stephen Harper, who signed the Canada-China FIPA deal, a 40-year term. We still have 30-some years left on that deal, where our security and our industries are transferred over to China wholeheartedly, not the United States of America. We are giving all of our strategic North American resources for what is supposed to be the reserve for the U.S. military and might, the security of North America, to now China. That's what all Crown politicians, from the far reaches of the Conservatives to the far reaches of the Liberal Party of Canada and every other party. There is not one elected official in Canada, federally or entirely regionally, that is not in bed with this narrative. Especially Conservatives, who are the most bought in, the most transitioned. In fact, without any doubts, Alberta is the most vested in China. You notice how I said Canada vested in China, not China vested in Canada? That's right. On the G7 radar created by the Trump administration in 2018, they've been following Canada and all the regions entirely since 2018. Even Joe Biden, the Biden administration, prosecuted all of the Canadian chartered banks in the American financial districts, 5 of which, out of their 12, have removed hundreds of Canadian institutions, branches from USA, punted, fined hundreds of millions of dollars, charged with fraud, racketeering, embezzlement, laundering. Oh yeah. All via the Bank of Canada, all via Mark Carney, an 8-year Conservative under Stephen Harper, who went on to become Boris Johnson's UK Governor of the Bank of England. Yeah, London, England, where he finalized all these transitions for Canada so we could trade out against the United States through the London trading system. Yeah, he ran Canada under Stephen Harper, Bank of Canada, all our chartered banks, all of them. Yes, even Alberta's ATB, where all my money sits, all my major investment sits. Think about how ironic that is as I was going through Alberta independence. Whole different platform, a whole different version of the Northern Gateway. And then all of a sudden Trans Mountain to China, now it's Northern Gateway to China. All premiers are in on this. Tim Houston is throwing Nova Scotians off their private property. He just gave an address today after Ford's. I will do whatever it takes for this transition of our economy, meaning there are no property rights. And just so Canadians know, just so you know, only 9% of this country is private property. So the Crown starts systematically taking your property away from you on that private property. That's all of Canada. Now, Atlantic provinces are small. Nova Scotia, 70% of it is private property. All of Atlantic Canada killed off all the First Peoples long before Canada was a country, when Canada was British North America. They did all that same way, absolutely, as British Columbia did, as Ontario and Quebec did. I'm sorry to say that. When I say that, these are the old boundaries of Upper and Lower Canada. Absolutely all of Atlantic Canada, absolutely all of British Columbia. What's left in Canada in the central area, what is now Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Northern Ontario, expanded after. That's what the actual Northwest Territories were carved up into when they created Alberta and Saskatchewan. They massively expanded Ontario and Quebec, massively expanded postage stamp Manitoba. These are known as the numbered treaty Indian lands. That is all that's left of what was and what isn't going to be anymore in Agenda 2050. All peoples residing in those numbered treaty lands are going to lose all of their resources and be subject to the rest. A very socialist and fascist system. What was presented today by Genus, he's the Conservative MP who's the shadow minister of transition here. He's a shadow minister for the Conservative Party. And he goes into, and I can't make it up, an hour rant about the youth unemployment as we're closely in Canada getting to Nepal numbers. We're only 5% youth unemployment to where Nepal got, where all the youth of Nepal went and burned down all government foundation and buildings. 69 of them shot dead, and they just continued to firebomb and burn all of the government down right across Nepal. They did that. Every single one. And their residencies too. Of course, the government fled. You all know what happened, or if you don't, you should go look at it. So the Conservatives come up with a plan that they're going to give employers money to buy the housing that employees need. Yeah. So you can work for these employers. They'll have you travel out to their housing units so you can work for them. So your employer is going to own your housing. I'm going to tell you the last country on record to doing this in real world history. Nobody's liking this post. This is the Conservative Party of Canada, live on CPAC. Over an hour. I watched it tonight. Can't make it up. That's Genus. That's him. That's a Conservative MP. Insider. Will be Privy Council to Pierre Poilievre if he's elected. He says this is a good strategy. The last country to incorporate this strategy was in 1934. Do you know who it was? It was Nazi Germany under then Chancellor Adolf Hitler. He started that way too. He said, hey, after the 1933 Enabling Act, he said, hey, all Jews, Poles, Romanians, and Gypsies. Yeah, you, the unemployed, because we're throwing you out of all our industries. Hey, we see the rise in unemployment. We're going to get all of our steel, our industries, all these industries that Trump's targeting right now. Nazi Germany did that too and said, hey, we're going to put you to work there. Those employers, we're going to give them the money. They're going to buy all these high-rise complex, through the GTA. The government's going to build them, but the employers are going to own them. And you're all going to work there and live under your employer's housing. They're going to buy it for you. Don't worry. Taxpayers are going to fund that. The government of Canada is going to fund that. They're going to borrow against taxpayers. Taxpayers don't have enough money, which they don't. That is their solution. They gave an hour presentation that if you elect them, that's what they're going to do. So your employer's going to own your housing, just like what Adolf Hitler did in Nazi Germany. Well, folks, that lasted. It did. Poles, Jews, Romanians, and Gypsies were put into these ghettos, working for their employers, and then they weren't working hard enough. They weren't working and producing enough. And the employer didn't want to pay them a fair wage. After all, you're living in their housing. You're living in their housing. So they put bands on their arms. They changed the wages. And then that wasn't enough either. They had work camps after that. Work camps outside the cities. Just exactly what Gina says for the Conservative Party of Canada tonight. That we're going to have these complexes outside of the cities. So you'll be close to your working areas. We're going to put you in there, owned by the employer. Well, Nazi Germany did that. And you know what happened when they went outside the cities? They were called concentration camps. Yeah, and then it was forced labor where they didn't even have to pay you a wage. You will make what the government tells you to make through their loyal private industries attached to the regime. And you'll do it for food, you'll do it for heat, you'll do it for water, and that residence alone. And you will do it. And if you don't know that this was done in Canada, most certainly was done on the railroad for all Ukrainians. All Ukrainians, Slavs and Poles, but absolutely all Ukrainians. They worked for nothing. I know my great-grandfather was a Swede. Yeah, from California. And he worked that railroad too. You know, the one that built Canada before Alberta was a province. He worked in Lake Louise. He got Crown land right in what would be Sundre, Alberta. Peter Lougheed's grandfather gave my grandfather his first loan out of Calgary. Oh yeah, set up shop, home quarter, Sundre, Alberta. It's not in our family anymore, but we had many quarters expanded all the way through all the natural gas. Long gone now, but that's truth. And in that time, my great-grandfather worked the railroad, and he got paid twice as much as the Chinese. At least they got paid, but only half as much as my great-grandfather. They couldn't get Crown land like my grandfather. They only got what's called Chinatown lots in town. Yeah, they weren't allowed quarters. But the Ukrainians, everybody, less than the Chinese, got nothing. They worked to eat. Their kids, their wives were put in concentration camps right here in Alberta. Actually all across Canada, but they still exist. They're the same camps that became Japanese internment camps. But at the time, southern Alberta, those were basic concentration camps that if the Ukrainian men did not work the railroad and work hard, their families didn't get fed in the concentration camp. They got no wages. They got fed. It's called forced labor. Just what Genus rolled out today. What he rolled out, Conservative Party of Canada, can only be found in our own history here in Alberta and Canada, the railroad, or Nazi Germany, 1934, and then the transition into full concentration camps, where at that point they were worked to death and then eventually sent to the ovens. This is you, Canadians. It does not matter. Conservative, Liberal, Green, Bloc, NDP, you pick it. It does not matter. If they've been elected, this is the transition they're going to. And to save their own skins on the threat of Canada, the 51st state, where you will see them all prosecuted. Folks, Doug Ford's worth $50 million, the premier. 7 years as premier. He's amassed a boatload. If you were to go 9 times that, that would be the equivalent of $450 million in the United States of America. A politician starting with 100 USD, and in a 7-year period, being worth 350 million USD. Can you imagine what would happen in the United States? A governor turning out that kind of mass fortune? Trudeau would be worth $1 billion USD. It'd be like a man starting with a few million from daddy and a few million. A teacher, a part-time teacher, who became prime minister in 9 years, amasses over $95 million. In USA, it would be the equivalent of a double-run president going from 7 million USD to over $1 billion as president. Can you imagine what Americans would do to that person? Do you know what would happen to them? There's no comparable. There's thieving in America. I'm not saying America's perfect. We've seen lots of American politicians making out on millions and millions. But folks, it pales in comparison to every single politician in Canada, no matter the province. They're all filthily stinking rich on an epic corruption rate that far exceeds anything you could hope to ever find in the United States of America. Not even in a realm of comparable. Literally 10 to 20 times worse than the United States. And the worst thing, Canadians, is that you have 10 times the government bloat elected, 100 times the government bloat appointed. And in civil societies on that tip, you're hundreds and hundreds of times over the United States. The corruption is way off the chart through massive government bloat. Literally 20% of the population is directly on that tip. And it is now more than the 19% who work knuckles to the bone trying to scratch out a living. And it certainly isn't enough. All the budgets are debt loaded beyond the United States. Is the federal government way out there in the US? Sure. But they're also the global reserve currency, and they're also the global military might of the world. Can Canada, in massive more debt and deficit than the United States? All sources. So folks, remember, public debt is always debt to GDP corporate, which is over 185%. Double, way over double the United States. Housing debt to GDP, way over double the United States. Provincial debt, way over triple all the states of the Union. And we're much smaller, and we're only 10 provinces, 3 territories, yet we're triple per capita theirs. And they're 50 states, 10 times their population. Let that sink in, because it's important to get real numbers here. Our federal debt, which is going to approach $3 trillion rapidly, how much different is that than the United States, 9 times their size? Do the math. That would be 27 trillion equivalency just in your federal government debt. I can go on and on. The municipalities, way out to lunch on the United States, not even the realm of comparison. Provinces are way out to lunch, not even the realm of comparison to the United States. We're off the charts. Conservative, liberal, NDP, you pick it. Provincially or federally, you pick it. They're all out to lunch. There's no saving grace. Stephen Harper was not a saving grace. He was instrumental in the Chinese transition, and like every other prime minister, doubles down on the entire debt of all prime ministers before them. Think about that for a second. Every prime minister now, since Stephen Harper, has doubled the debt of all prime ministers combined before them. Trudeau did the same with Stephen Harper. And Carney is rapidly doing the same thing. That's what we call exponential. Do you know what it is to double a penny? We don't even have pennies anymore in Canada. We're down to nickels because we're so devalued. You can't even run pennies in Canada anymore. We're that devalued. And soon, I think, a quarter is going to be the new nickel. That's coming rapidly. In 1 year's time, if you don't know, this is where we're going to be in 1 year's time. I know a lot of people don't want to hear this. I know it's unpopular. Truth is never popular, especially when you have a mass amount of people in absolute denial. And whether you like it or not, if you keep your head in the sand and you keep saying, I just have to elect a conservative to get out of this, you're sadly mistaken. USA isn't going to allow you out of this, Canada. You're not getting out. You're the most reliant on the United States of any other country in the world. And all of your highest source revenue, primary sector industries are being, I'm not going to swear, are being kicked beyond all measure and ruined. Being ruined. Folks, you need to share this video. We watched 3 Canadian conservative premiers embed themselves with Mark Carney, a 16-year conservative who flopped in the last 2 just to win Liberal Prime Minister. There is no such thing as political parties in Canada. It's institutionalization and brainwashing. There is only one crown in Canada. Federal and provincial. That's it. That's the way it's always been. You cannot elect yourself out of this tyranny, this autocracy, this transition to China. There is no hope for that. There is only one thing that's going to do that, and that's called Canada, the 51st state. And I'm sorry, it takes every Canadian to accept this truth. Please, everybody, share. I know a lot of people don't want to look at these things, but this is truth. Undeniable, in-our-face truth today. When do you panic? When we hit 60 cents on the USD? What about 50 cents? 40 cents? 30 cents? 25 cents on the dollar. That has been my long-term projection since December of 2024. And those who've been following me closely, I've nailed every sanction embargo coming from the United States in succession, week after week, month after month, and it's soon to be year after year. And I tell you, the next major kick that we're not coming back from is, mark my words, April 15th, 2026, when all Americans get their tax refunds, and they're never going to want to go back. And the idea of Canada, the 51st state, is never, ever going to be as it is today on that day going forward. It will be hard, nearly impossible to get. And from there, there's midterms. And if Trump lands supermajority after so many Americans get their tax returns and they see the beauty, the bounty of it, Canadians, we're done. This war on China, with us floating on the yuan, if you ever want to know it, proof is in the pudding. Mark Carney, Governor of the Bank of Canada, appointed by Stephen Harper, Conservatives, he was Conservative, was the transitionary letter of us floating the Canadian dollar on this rising, booming Chinese economy, and that we had floated on China yuan against the USD. He got every business, every chartered organization in Canada to go this direction. All provinces, absolutely Conservatives first. It's why Alberta is now the largest source of China investment projects in all of Canada. Been transitioning since 2008. We're the only province to sell an entire military base to China. We have 8,500 Chinese CCTV cameras in the province of Alberta, in most village, towns, hamlets, cities in all of Canada. That's Alberta. And people don't want to see it. Share this video, get it out there, get it to everybody you know. God bless everybody. Have a great night. Share, share, share. Get it out there. Point critical. Bye now.